Hello and welcome to Reactive to Proactive, how to shift your data protection strategy. Today's webinar is sponsored by Cohesity and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we have 4 housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know there in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources, and I'd especially like to call your attention to 3 great PDFs in there. There's one on cyber resilience in the ransomware era, one on the top 2024 trends in Gen AI, data security, and multi-cloud, and one on countering ransomware attacks with Cohesity. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find a link with the details there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event is over, the Actual Tech team will look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. All right, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's fantastic content. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Chris Hoff, who's a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Cohesity, and we have Jed Wallace, who's a Staff Technologist at Cohesity. Chris and Jed, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. All right, well, I'm going to turn things over to you guys, so I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. So if you've been around data security for any length of time, you've noticed a very specific trend, and that is that data security is now part of the cybersecurity stack. And it's kind of interesting to me because I've been around for longer than I like to admit, but we've moved from a time where we had bastion hosts and siloed solutions for specific problems, which, by the way, was the 90s. And for my Gen X brothers and sisters, that was 30 years ago, to what has been known as integrated architectures, right? Where we have different pieces of the security stack talking to each other in meaningful ways in order to better respond and recover from a cyber attack. For the sake of argument, we're just going to refer to all cyber attacks as ransomware just because it's easier that way. But what we're finding more and more is organizations are still reacting to the attack, right? They find out that the attack happened because somebody calls the help desk and says, my laptop is acting funny. And that's forcing a thought change within organizations to figure out ways to use things like their backup data in new ways. And as a matter of fact, for about the last year and a half, one of the biggest questions that I've heard is what can I do with this data? How can I use it in a new way? And for security folks, that means threat hunting. Now, when I say threat hunting, that means different things to different people, right? There's this perception that when a security event happens, when a breach happens, that it's a very organized thing. We have our first responders, they come in, right? Everybody goes into a conference room, opens up their handbooks to page 1 and goes through it. But the reality is that we're finding out that a breach has happened either because somebody came to us and asked about this funny thing that's going on, or because somebody is actively looking for breadcrumbs. And so what we're hearing more and more, like I said earlier, is that people want to do this hunting with their backup data. And it makes sense because you can troll through it as much as you want. You can restore the data into what I'll call a clean room environment. You can break things without having to worry about production. And so we're seeing this as being a more popular way to threat hunt. And you'll see us coming out with more and more features helping organizations to do that. Now, in order to get there, we have a lot of different things that we need to do, right? You've probably heard analysts talking about things like security maturity, right? You look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, and it tells you how to be more mature with your cyber program. And so what I like to do is I like to think about that as what are the reactive things, or kind of the table stakes that we need to have in place in order to make ourselves safe, and what are the capabilities that we can use in order to be more proactive, to figure out who's attacking us, to figure out what odd things may be going on that could lead to catastrophe. And so when I talk about that, I think about things like being able to search for indicators of compromise, or being able to understand where my assets are, and more importantly, where my important assets are, versus everything else, right? And not all data is created equal. The things that I create may not be as important as the things that, I don't know, our finance team creates, or even our product management team and our developers create. Although I like to think I'm pretty important, it's more about making sure that we can see what's going on, and we're not alone in that. One of the things that we've led the charge on, and it's one of the reasons why I joined Cohesity, is this idea of a security alliance. This idea of an integrated architecture only works when everyone is playing together and doing it in more meaningful ways, other than just saying, oh, I've got an API and you can kind of roll your own. And so we're bringing together the best of the best in order to create that true integrated architecture. And in my opinion, this is a better solution than the traditional platform plays, right? If you're locked into I don't know, a DSPM vendor because that's what some other vendor you're using is forcing you to work with, it's not going to be as good as being able to have the right solution for your needs. And so that's why we want to work with all of the players who are out there, both our friends and our frenemies, in order to build that true stack. Now, given all of that, what does that mean? Like, how do we operationalize this in the real world? And that's why I've brought Jed here to have the brains of the operation. And so one of the first things that and I mentioned this briefly, but Jed, I mentioned earlier about being able to understand where our data is. So in our world, what does that mean? What do we need to do to get that kind of visibility?
Well, I bring us back to one of our old marketing taglines is "Know your data." That I think that's actually very true. And so, if you can see here on this slide, this is showing the inventory tab on DataHawk, and here you can see your various workloads. You can see what's being protected, what might have a possible anomaly, possible threats, data classification for things like PII data, knowing that data that's most sensitive, whether it's finance or finance, accounting, stuff
Or
like
mine.
that. Yeah, exactly. People's social security numbers, credit card numbers, all that kind of good stuff. Whether a workload is being vaulted, that's to our Fort Knox, so where you would have that read-only immutable copy of your backup data, and also posture risk, which shows you um, identifies possible weak points in your cohesity cluster stack. So yeah, but I really agree that I think the start for any organization is to know what their workloads are, what workloads have the highest they has highly sensitive data in it, and treat it accordingly. You need to set those priorities as far as you know what you want to protect and what do you want to look at first, because somebody's not going to, if there's a ransomware attack, they're not going to be looking at your height and weight. They want your credit card number so they can actually have a financial gain to this attack and stuff. So
Absolutely. And ransomware is the only type of disaster where somebody's actively working against you to stop you from recovering. So understanding where that data is and being able to classify that data allows you, really sets the baseline for everything that you can do next. And
right.
on that note, um, we take it a little bit further too, right? With understanding what your overall security posture is. So talk a little bit about this. What are we doing here?
So here, this will kind of show you when it comes to like your cohesity infrastructure. It'll show you what some of the best practices for securing your clusters. For example, are using things like RBAC and encryption and other things to secure your environment, right? I mean, you need to start at the infrastructure, right, and then work your way up. So this is kind of giving you an easy bird's eye view into possible weak points in your infrastructure.
Got it. Got it. So we're really telling you not only that the data is protected, but it's also where it's protected and where some of your gaps may be is really what I
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
perfect. And so when we are actually classifying data, talk about a little bit how we're doing that and what we're doing for our customers in this.
So for the data classification piece, we're providing over 253-ish classification patterns out the box. So it covers probably 98% of all the PII data you want to try to find and classify: credit card numbers, social security numbers, addresses, first last names, et cetera, et cetera. So and you can right now you can create a couple of custom ones if you want to change the priority, say from if social security number is set to medium and that's high to you, you can create a custom one and set it to high, things like that, or just create a couple of custom ones you want to see in addition to the ones that are out of the box. So
And so we're doing this with with the backup data, with our secondary data, so that we can then take that information and apply whatever policy changes we need into what I'll call primary data. Is that a fair way to put it?
yeah, and it brings me to the thought that another really great point to using your secondary data is you're not affecting production systems by scanning data, live data on say a production SQL server, where you're gonna have a performance degradation that's gonna hit your CPU and your memory and all those other kind of things. So it's really passive, and I think that's a great thing to point
For
out.
sure, for sure, especially with the cost of hardware these days, adding those extra cycles is going to become a little bit prohibitive especially for the largest organizations.
Yeah, definitely.
So we know where our data is. We know what our data is
Hmm.
in the world of a cyber attack. We can scan for anomalies and all that type of stuff, but one of the things that is interesting to me is that we can essentially go threat hunting with the tools that are in our portfolio in secondary data. And so we can actually take the information without having to add really much else to it. We can look for indicators of compromise that could actually be telling us that something is going wrong. Talk about how we're able to do that here.
So, we're partnering with, like you said, we have these partnerships with all these, we'll call them the big boys in the game. And some of one of our partners we use to actually scan this data to look for anomalies. And that's and then that's out the box, which, I think this kind of leads us into, my other point, and I'm not sure if this is the next slide, Chris. I remember if it is the ability to use custom YARA rules. So the ability to kind of put in that, those your own YARA rules to be able to look for specific things.
For sure, and you don't have to be a YARA expert, right? We're providing what is it? It's over 100,000 YARA rules out of the box. I think we're doing today.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, there's all the free ones that are kicking around out there in GitHub. And of course, I mentioned GitHub. If there is something that is less than trustworthy that you're pulling out of GitHub, you're still using secondary data. So to your point, Jed, we're not affecting live production
systems, right?
Which, as someone who's broken things in the past, I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, early on in my career, I've made all those mistakes. So no one's perfect.
Exactly. What's the worst that can happen 3 days later?
You could cost your company a few $1 million in a day. That's the worst that can happen.
So I mentioned so we can use these tools to both react to an attack or an incident, or we can go threat hunting. We can of course look at where an attack came from, right, with our anomaly detection, but we can also we are also partnering with folks like Cisco and their XDR solution, so that when their XDR solution finds something that's anomalous, they can cause us to create a snapshot, so that you can either have something out of band to do an investigation with, or quite possibly you can have your last clean snapshot available. But we're also looking at looking for malware in the environment itself, right? And we're doing this anomaly detection, looking at things like entropy and file extension changes. So we're not pretending to be a malware detection company, but we're giving you the tools so that when something suspicious happens, you can take a step back and use those YARA rules and use all of our other tools to figure out what's going on. The next piece of this, though, is how we're using. Oh, this is actually the same slide. Look at that. It's basically the same slide. Should have pulled that one out. So
we're not perfect.
It was different pictures.
It's all good.
So one of the things that we hear about as well is the fact that we've got immutability set up, we've got encryption set up, we're hopefully using MFA And if you're not using MFA everywhere, please turn it on.
And avoid using SMS for MFA. Just
Yes,
FYI, please. It's so
100%.
antiquated. Yeah.
100%. And for the last 10 years, every post-mortem for the major cyber attacks has talked about, and this isn't a total aside, but
Right.
the past 10 years, every cyber attack has had some kind of a password issue and a user access issue involved with it.
Yep.
So please turn on MFA. But we're also being asked, like, how do I make sure that the backups aren't being tampered with? As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine who does threat research was saying that what they're seeing is a long tail attack, right? Somebody who's living off the land will actually change the backup jobs so that the logs don't change, the amount of data doesn't change, right? The backup still happens, but you're backing up garbage. And the hope is that they can be in there long enough for you to cycle out your good data, so that when you finally realize that an attack has happened, that there's nothing to restore. The other side of that is kind of the brute force, where they'll just go in and they'll just trash the backups, right? They'll actually trash the disks that the immutable storage is on. And so we've got this capability called Fort Knox that allows you to have an offsite copy of your data, right? Following that 3-2-1 best practice, right? But you can have an offsite version of your backup sitting in a vaulted, secure environment that you can set up. We call it quorum, right? It's segregation of duties, right? Being able to have two people verify that something should happen. But what's interesting about this is a number of our customers are starting to use Fort Knox as a way to respond to a cyber attack. And what I mean by that is that they're storing gold images and actually software, right? Software installers in Fort Knox, because when a cyber attack happens, their expectation is to lose everything, right? And imagine losing your phone system, so suddenly you can't communicate with the outside world. Losing the basics that we all rely on and never think about, like DNS.
Active Directory. Yeah.
Yep.
File servers.
just the box itself, right?
Yeah.
And so more and more folks are starting to realize that, and we call it the minimum viable company, right? Or minimum viable network. And it's a way to make sure that you can start spinning that stuff back up. And by the way, it's also a good place to store your incident response documentation, so that, that server gets breached as well, or, the guy who wrote it is on vacation, because that's never happened before.
And Chris, we can, to let them know, we can also send duplicates of that data to different regions. So you'll be covered. If your one region is hit, your data, you could possibly have the latest clean snapshots in another region. So
that's a great point. And what we're seeing, Fort Knox is being used in what I referred to it earlier, in a clean room environment. And so what I mean by that is that it's a secondary piece of infrastructure where you can restore data, you can do your investigation, and then you can start to put that data, once it's clean, back into production. And so Fort Knox becomes part of that clean room because now you've got verified and secure installers for you to start to rebuild from. Now, what's interesting about this is we've been able to do this for quite a while. As a matter of fact, just the simple fact that our instant mass recovery IMR can restore data to a separate target essentially gives you a clean room style environment. But the nice thing is that if we've got this environment that we can start to build off of, get the slide to move forward, we can give the investigators access, right, and it's essentially something that they don't even know that they need in a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. And they can do their work in a segregated environment. And once they realize, what's going on and whatnot, right? They're in a live fire environment that can't get back out to the production network. And so once we have this, once we have the incident figured out, we can start to put everything back into production, right? And I talk about this specifically because there's a lot of folks, particularly in our industry, who will talk about, well, we can scan for malware, so you just scan for the malware and then you just put everything back into production. But that's not how this works. And so we want to be very prescriptive about that, right? So that you can figure out what's really going on, to your point, Jed, without hitting up your production environment, right? Because it could very well be that the entire network isn't impacted, and some businesses still being able to go on, and then get the pieces back into play that were in fact hit. Did I do a good enough job talking about that, Jed?
No, I think so. I mean, not everybody's going to have, the infrastructure to do this, but even, I've been through a few ransomware attacks, and I could tell you, even as the small ones, they keep the same principle going as far as like a separate system to do forensics. And for some security analysts, that's a laptop that has no internet access, and it has their tools loaded on that laptop. They have that infected. Let's just assume, because most companies now they're using a virtualized environment. They'll put that virtual machine loaded up in VirtualBox on a laptop, and then they'll start doing forensics, right? I mean, yeah, it's literally the same principle, though, right? So it stands. So I think you did a great job of explaining this.
Excellent. The idea, the idea though is that you don't need to have your entire infrastructure or spare hardware sitting there, and this could this could also conceivably be, I'll call it cloudy hardware.
That's the other good point is, with people who have a hybrid environment, they have access to, whether it's Azure or AWS. You can always you can have like a cold site, and you could just spin up, those. You can spin up that we'll call it a clean room, whether it's in AWS using EC2 or Azure VMs, and you have all the network and all that stuff pre-set up. You can have that infrastructure spun down, so you're not really being charged. And then if God forbid there's an incident, you can spin that stuff up, and then you can start doing your forensics and start doing the things that we're discussing as well, as opposed to having $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of spare equipment sitting in a room that's not being used. So there's a lot of really cost efficient ways to do this. And I think that, for me, that might be one of them, right?
For sure. And you can, because you're spinning up the pieces of your environment that you need, you can also have your tooling sitting there. As a matter of fact, that's another great use case for Fort Knox is having your. I think I heard somebody refer to it as their cyber incident response go bag.
Yeah.
Sitting out in Fort Knox, so that you can just pull it down and start going to town.
Yeah, and that triggers a thought in my brain that is, when I have these conversations, it's, my first question is always, do you have a plan? Do you have a playbook, right? That physical binder that says when XYZ happens, you do this, this, and this, whether it's your data center was cratered by an asteroid or, you had a ransomware attack. You have policies and procedures in a run book that you follow, and this should all be in there, right? That's about being prepared. I think is the best thing you could do. All this stuff is fine and dandy that we're talking about, but if you don't have a plan, you're going to be running around with chickens like your head cut off. So,
absolutely,
I digress.
And that plan needs to include non-technical people.
It absolutely does, and there's so much that goes into doing the run book, and I don't want to go too far off but things like where a worker's going to work if you're cut off from the data center entirely. What if you're not using all physical endpoints like Windows PC or whatever, and all your endpoints that your users use are virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, right? How do you account for this stuff, right? So it's just, there's so much that goes into it, but you got to take the time, the months it takes to plan. There's always going to be legal involved and all this other stuff to approve about everything. So
for sure. So bringing this all back around, from our perspective, data security and what's traditionally been referred to as backup and recovery is part of the cybersecurity stack these days. As a matter of fact, in the plans that Jed was talking about, the backup and recovery and the infrastructure folks are being asked more and more to prove that the backup is going to work. So we need to make sure that that's going to happen first and foremost. But we also need to make sure that everybody understands what else can be done with this amazing data that's sitting there, because we essentially have a second copy of our entire infrastructure, well, not infrastructure, but all of our data, right, sitting in storage, waiting to be used. And so whether it's building out a threat hunting program from the ground up, right? If you're not quite there yet, it's using something like the product happens to be called DataHawk. Using DataHawk to start a program is going to be a great place to prove out the value of a more proactive stance within your environment. Not to mention the reactive pieces, right? Being able to find the threats that are sitting in the data before you restore. Being able to use third-party tools in that data, tools that you're already using in production, tools that you've already paid for, so you can get more value out of them. Making sure that we've got all of that in a place that allows us to get that recovery done faster and get it done in a way that's not going to reinfect the environment. So with that, I've been peeking off to the side every once in a while. We're gonna open up the Q&A. So we'll bring Scott back in,
hey,
and see what's been happening out in the audience.
Yeah, sounds good. Great presentation, great discussion so far. First one here, wondering, how do Cohesity's cyber resilience capabilities differentiate from traditional backup solutions in terms of mitigating cyber threats such as ransomware?
You want to take that, Chris, or you want me to take it?
I'll let you go first.
Well, our capabilities, they go beyond the traditional backup. We do this by integrating advanced features like anomaly detection, immutability, rapid recovery, which helps us to combat cyber threats such as ransomware, and providing that comprehensive depth and excuse me, that depth and defense in depth approach. So
Awesome.
Okay. Next question here comes from Warren, who's wondering if the system works in a Mac environment.
Like like Apple Macintosh?
Yeah. That's what I think he's talking about.
Yeah. Yes. Short answer.
Great. Short answer. Sweet.
I hope so, because I'm sitting here on my Mac.
Next one here. Can you outline the specific features within Cohesity's cyber resilience framework that contribute to rapid detection and recovery from cyber attacks?
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm gonna hit this one up, Jed, and you can add pieces on this. So the number one piece that we've got, and we mentioned it earlier, is the ability to use our threat feeds to scan for anomalies, as well as to use Yara rules. And I will say that coming to a theater near you, we're adding more abilities in that area. So be on the lookout for that, so that you'll be able to essentially bring your own threat feeds. And of course, there's our built-in anomaly detection, which is just part of the base data protect package. That
buzzword AI anomaly detection. Buzzword.
And we've introduced artificial intelligence, so that today it's more for data analytics, but you can be confident that there's going to be some security applications for that coming to a theater near you.
And I'd be remiss, we also providing the immutable backups, which helps to prevent tampering, things like that. And our IMR, which is the instant mass recovery, which helps you do that rapid recovery at scale.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Another one here, they're wondering, what strategies does Cohesity employ to ensure the integrity and security of backup data, particularly in the face of evolving cyber threats and compliance requirements?
I'll take a first crack at that, and if you want to fill in any gaps there, Chris, go ahead. Basic things like we employ encryption, RBAC, which is the role-based access controls, and other data validation techniques. Chris, remind me what compliance certifications do we abide by?
You would ask that question.
It's because I don't remember.
I know we take them. We do take them for granted.
We do. It's boring, but it's what the C-suite want to hear, right? So
yeah. And
what are those?
Don't forget about quorum as well, right? Being able to have that separation of duties to make sure that nobody's mucking with your backups.
Okay, excellent. Next one here. Well, actually, Jed, whenever we've got a technical specialist on one of these events, I always like to ask whether there's some feature of the platform that you love and that you wished more customers would take advantage of.
I think the basics of DataHawk, which is what I would like to call, is even if it is a false positive, it's still early detection, right? It's knowing ahead of time that there might be something hinky or suspicious going on in your systems. And we're all crossing our fingers and hoping that that's not the case. But if it is, guess what? You could start acting accordingly. You can start to react faster than than the threat might start spreading, and you might be able to cut it off at the knees earlier. So I really think just the basic first, the core of DataHawk is that that AI driven anomaly detection. I think to me is the most impactful and useful feature of it. So all the other stuff is just built on that, right? Is all those third party integrations like Cisco XDR and everything. We could feed these anomaly detections into these, like Chris said, these SIM tools you might already own, whether it's from Palo Alto, Cisco XDR, Microsoft Sentinel. So you can start actually companies don't have to buy new tools or anything. They could just integrate with their existing backup infrastructure and look at that secondary data and look for that possible threat. So
awesome. We had another question here from Lewis, which came in kind of early, but it might be a good kind of sort of recap question. Lewis is wondering how to confirm that we indeed have a proactive data protection strategy.
That's actually a really good question. So, there are not, so I mentioned security maturity at the very beginning. There are a number of assets out there. I think ISO 27001, obviously NIST, have various self-assessments that you can do that will allow you to measure your current security maturity and figure out kind of where you sit. The shorter answer though is to ask yourself, are you proactively looking for threats in your environment?
or weak points.
Do you know who's attacking you? Because not everybody's going to get hit with a 0-day threat from some rogue nation, right? But it's still a possibility, right? So I would start with any of those assessments, and figure out where you sit today, and then put a plan in place to improve on a quarterly basis at best.
Yeah, and I would add to that. Have a third party audit done. That has always been the starting point for me before I got onto the vendor side. Is we would have a third party audit done, and then we would start checking the boxes next to any of the weak points, right? To start better securing your data, and that goes, that includes backups and disaster recovery and all the other stuff. So it's not just implementing antivirus and web application firewalls to prevent SQL injections and stuff like that. It's a holistic approach, but there's a lot of good companies out there that do those. I know people, their eyes go wide when you say audit, but if you're paying for audit, it's the good kind, right? So that'd be one of my suggestions.
I really like that rule. That's a great rule.
Yeah.
Nice rule of thumb there. Well, it's probably a great place to leave it. But Chris, if somebody wants to get started with Cohesity or find out more, what do you recommend for them?
So absolutely, you can sign up obviously for free trials. You can contact us, visit us at if you're going to RSA, visit us in our booth. We're going to be on the north side of the expo, and we've got a number of events going on there. And other than that, take advantage of the resources that we've provided. And actually, I'll give a plug we do a ransomware workshop on a regular basis. It's a little bit of a traveling roadshow, but it is a true tabletop exercise where you go through a ransomware attack and and respond to it as a team. So, if you're looking for places to start, then those are great assets, because now you can actually say that you've been through it.
Yeah, I'm actually doing my first. I'll be hosting one in Rochester, New York, on June 25th. So I'm excited for me, because for me it'll be my first running the workshop. So uh, I'll be excited to see folks there.
Awesome.
And May 14th in Boston. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
All right, great. Well, Chris and Jed, thank you guys so much for this. Was a great presentation. Thanks for all the insights here in the Q&A as well. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having us.
yeah, thank you.
All right, we're going to let those guys go and move on to our last piece of business here. And that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card today is Rod McCorkle from New Hampshire. So congratulations to Rod. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And this is just a quick reminder that if you want to grab any of those resources that Chris and Jed were referring to there, there's those 3 PDFs in the handout section. With that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I just want to thank Cohesity for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.